Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to my discussion about The Great Gatsby and 5 things I think that make it great. It occurred to me that I talked about Faulkner, and I've made videos about Hemingway and of the kind of big three male American authors whose careers began in the 1920s as a part of that kind of lost generation that Fitzgerald was the only one I hadn't talked about. And it also occurred to me you don't hear a whole lot about F. Scott Fitzgerald on BookTube, which I kind of think is a shame. But this whole idea of doing a video about The Great Gatsby came up basically because of the classes I teach. I teach a dual credit American history class to mainly 16-year-olds, and we were talking about the changes that industrialization brought to society and how it kind of changed our ideas about social class. And I knew my students were reading The Great Gatsby in their English class at this point, so I pointed out that Tom Buchanan and Nick Carraway and Gatsby himself represent kind of three different parts of the class system. Tom was old money and so on. And then it occurred, I was later talking about the kind of late 19th century industrial era kind of fixation with the idea of social Darwinism, and I brought out that Tom Buchanan was certainly someone who would have believed in social Darwinism. And so it occurred to me that I kept bringing up The Great Gatsby, and we hadn't even gotten to the 1920s yet in American history. And so I thought, there are reasons why Great Gatsby has for a long time, I think, been considered the great American novel. And it has a lot to do with the fact that it kind of captures something that was true about the United States of America in the 1920s, and maybe about the United States and American ideas throughout the 20th century. So there are 5 things I think that make The Great Gatsby great. Number one are the characters. If you've read The Great Gatsby, even if you've just seen the movies, you know that there are memorable characters there. Gatsby himself is an incredibly memorable character, a tragic character, a character who believes in the promise of the United States of America, that anybody can be successful, that anybody can make it, that anybody can achieve their dreams. Tom Buchanan, the blustering, bullying, racist, misogynist who nonetheless deeply loves Daisy, represents old money and the old ideas about social class and wealth. Daisy herself, one of the great, or not great, but maybe one of the best known female characters in American literature, outside of Scarlett O'Hara perhaps. Her kind of diaphanous beauty, her ability to be idle and to do nothing, her strange sense of morality and parenting, and her ways that her charm works on men, which are difficult even for Nick, her cousin, who kind of narrates the story to us to explain the fact that this is probably one of the great classic love triangles in American literature. Daisy, Tom, Gatsby. Gatsby with his claim to Daisy's kind of youthful idealism and her belief in kind of just true love despite wealth, and her longing in some ways to go back to that person she was when Gatsby knew her, and to see herself the way he saw her then, the way he still sees her in the book, but held in place by her, I think, real love for Tom, based on their lives together, based on their shared experiences, based on their shared ideas of social class and those values, all held together. Those are 3 memorable characters before we even get to, Nick or Myrtle or Wilson or any of the other characters who show up. I think they're great characters in the book. So the second thing I think that makes the book great are images. I think that opening scene where Nick goes to the Buchanan's house the first time, and he meets Tom, and we learn everything we need to know about Tom, I think, in a few sentences, thanks to Fitzgerald's kind of gift for description. But then they walk in where Daisy and Jordan Baker are kind of lounging on a sofa, and all the windows are open, and the curtains are blowing, and they're just there kind of in this languorous, beautiful, kind of a dreamlike state when Nick walks in and sees them, and he's immediately charmed, falls back into kind of that love he has for Daisy, and charmed like all men are. And then Tom goes around the room and shuts all the doors, kind of sealing it off and giving you that idea of how he controls Daisy and how he seals her off from those things maybe that are like her dreams or own ideas. That's a great scene. The Valley of the Ashes that they have to drive through to go from East Egg to West Egg and vice versa, and to get into New York City. And its representation perhaps of a purgatory, the purgatory that the working classes find themselves in. The broken down old sign with Dr. Eckelberger's eyes looking at you, and from the point of view of Wilson, judging you all the time, like God judging people, and just the kind of almost hell-like description of it. It's being a place of ashes and cinders, and it's gray and it's black, and trains show up, and then weird stuff happens. The workers there set to work immediately, and what exactly they're doing you don't know. And the oily river, which borders it on one side, which I think represents the river Styx. Just really some great images there. The scene with the shirts, where Gatsby and Daisy have met, and he's trying to impress her, essentially with his wealth, and he throws all these shirts onto a table, all these different kinds of shirts, and she's so moved by their beauty, and I guess, in a sense, moved by, Gatsby's attempt to prove to her that he is the kind of man that she could be with, move her to tears. And then the green light itself, the green light that is at the end of the Buchanan's Pier across the bay from where Gatsby's place is, and then he stands there and he looks at it and he longs for that light, and the light represents his ideas of success, which are tied up in Daisy and wealth. The third thing I think makes the book great are just kind of the social classes and the social class dynamic that exists there, which I think is somewhat is not all that easy to spot. Tom and Daisy representing old money and the idle rich, literally neither one of them having work to do. Daisy's child is always taken care of by someone else if she chooses, and they're free to do whatever they want to, and all Tom has to do is ride polo ponies. He doesn't have to actually work. That kind of old money ideal, that's the way old money's supposed to represent itself. Gatsby, up and coming new money who's made money in ways that the old money don't approve of. For him, the end result is to be wealthy, to have achieved this, to gone from essentially nothing to achieve wealth, to achieve his dream, which obviously also includes Daisy, but his lack of moral compunction in terms of getting what he wants and achieving the success he wants. Nick, who comes from a good, solid family, probably upper middle class, who's finds himself in the 20s floundering a bit, trying to learn a profession, a trade, to make money, to be somewhat independent. He is the opposite of Tom and Gatsby in lots of ways. And then the Wilsons, Myrtle Wilson, the mistress of Tom Buchanan, who desperately wants to have what Daisy has, to be who Daisy is. But, clearly Tom not seeing her being like Daisy at all. He won't even let her say her name without physically assaulting her. And her husband, Wilson, who's hardworking and wants to move ahead, and who Tom just really takes advantage of and plays for a fool. All these social class ideas are there. Wilson stuck in the purgatory of the working class and in the land of ashes, and Nick living in the small little cabin where he can see wealth, but he's not really achieved it. Gatsby trying to have what Tom has, both Daisy and the wealth and the ease and the idleness of that wealth. Those kind of social ideas, I think, are really a strong undercurrent in The Great Gatsby. The fourth thing I think is great about The Great Gatsby is just the 20s itself. Fitzgerald is known as, the author, the voice of the jazz age and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not sure that he set out necessarily to do that. I'm not sure that he didn't. But he does kind of capture that time period. In particular, he does a great job of showing how traditional values have been discarded by this younger generation. They are essentially amoral. Tom and Daisy are willing to use people to meet their own ends. They enter into affairs without any thought about the moral propriety. Daisy is more than willing to at least think about enter into an affair with Gatsby, and Gatsby is not slowed down or stopped by the fact that Daisy's married to Tom at all. He is driven for what he wants to achieve, which is Daisy, and to achieve Daisy, he's had to achieve that wealth. I mean, even Jordan Baker cheats at golf. Here she is, this golf champion, and she cheats at golf. Gatsby has entered into work with a bootlegger here in the book Meyer Wolfsheim, who essentially represents Arnold Rothstein, a real bootlegger, gambler, kind of one of the creators of organized crime. I think the mentor to Meyer Lansky and that kind of criminal element. And that bootlegging itself and the alcohol, a key element of kind of the Jazz Age idea, and just the idea, of prohibition and its impact on life in the 1920s. The cars, my goodness, the cars. I wonder honestly if anybody's done a study of whether or not Gatsby or Fitzgerald's work is the first American works of literature in which cars play such a key role, both as symbols of wealth and success, and then just their cultural importance and the freedom that they give. I wonder about that. But there's so much stuff in the novel that's just, screams 1920s, that to me that's one of the things that makes it great. And then the fifth thing I think that makes The Great Gatsby great is the writing itself. So, to talk about the writing, I thought I would just read two scenes from The Great Gatsby. And I'll put the words up on the screen. One is, I'm going to read the scene where Gatsby is showing Daisy the shirts. He took out a pile of shirts and began throwing them one by one before us, shirts of sheer linen and thick silk and fine flannel, which lost their folds as they fell and covered the table in many-colored disarray. While we admired, he brought more, and the soft, rich heap mounted higher, shirts with stripes and scrolls and plaids and coral and apple green and lavender and faint orange with monograms of Indian blue. Suddenly, with a strange sound, Daisy bent her head into the shirts and began to cry stormily. I love that description of the shirts and just kind of how beautifully described that scene is. And then the end. I think the end of The Great Gatsby has some of the best closing lines of a novel ever. And that's my opinion, but my channel, my video. So here we go. These are the last paragraphs of The Great Gatsby, which I think are some of the best closing sentences in American literature. And as I sat there brooding on the old unknown world, I thought of Gatsby's wonder when he first picked out the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. He'd come a long way to this blue lawn, and his dream must have seemed so close that he could hardly fail to grasp it. He did not know that it was already behind him, somewhere back in that vast obscurity beyond the city, where the dark fields of the Republic rolled on under the night. Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgiastic future that year by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch out our arms farther, and one fine morning... So we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. Maybe it's because I'm a history person, but that last line just always gets me. There's something, by the way, Whitman-esque about that image of being, Gatsby's past being out there in the vast farmland, the dark land of the Republic, and being drawn to the lights of the city. The way in which Fitzgerald describes that reminds me of Whitman a little bit. So anyway, there you go. Those are my 5 reasons why I think The Great Gatsby is great. And I would also just like to, again, put out a theory out there about The Great Gatsby, and it's this, that The Great Gatsby became kind of the principal American novel taught in schools, and as I said earlier, still taught in schools today. And it's achieved this kind of reputation and greatness when, to be honest with you, when it was published, it was not that well received, and it didn't sell that well. And it really wasn't until, I think, professors and teachers in the 1960s, maybe like late 1950s, began to pick it up and to kind of promote it and to have it read. And as Steve Donahue will say, one of the ways to, achieve a classic is to have your book taught in school. I think Gatsby is certainly that. And I think part of the reason for that is that it signals kind of that the falsity of the American dream, that kind of almost cynicism about the American dream and the ability to achieve it, the ability to get ahead, to achieve the things you want, when in reality you are born backwards, ceaselessly, into the past, that the current of your own life brings you back. Those are ideas that I think were ideas that sounded right. That kind of cynicism about the American dream probably sounded right to professors and teachers of the 1960s who grew up maybe in the 1960s and taught in the 70s, 80s, 90s, etc. I wonder if we're not going to need a new novel to represent new American ideas about the American dream, and that the younger generations, the millennials and so on, will want to tell a new story and to read a new story. Anyway, there you go. There's my take on the 5 reasons why The Great Gatsby is great. Look forward to your comments in the comment section below, and as always, thank you for watching.